Head back on track. This is Dr. Maxwell. Quick question. Do you believe that Jesus was a Muslim and he has disciples? If that is true, and that's what you believe, my question is very simple. If Isa bin Maryam was truly a Muslim, a servant of Allah, preaching Islam, then his closest friends, disciples, they must be mentioned by their name in the Quran. These are the individuals who lived with Jesus. They have to be mentioned by their names in the Quran. Now, the men who lived with him, followed him, suffered for him, and spread his message are not mentioned in the Quran by their name. Now the question comes, is truly Isa bin Maryam the same Jesus Christ appeared in the gospel before the Quran was introduced? This is a challenge to Muslims. Let me give you a challenge, a simple challenge. Which surah and ayah mention the names of Jesus' disciples or the apostles? They are known. There are 12. They are mentioned in the gospel that existed before the Quran. They are mentioned there impeccably, one after another, and how he got them. All I need from the Quran is the Quran to give evidence to us, to prove to us that the Isa bin Maryam in the Quran is the very Jesus in the infallible word, the gospel or the angel. I repeat again another challenging question. Why does the Quran never, I say again, never name a single apostle of Jesus Christ, his disciples? No Peter was mentioned, no John was mentioned, James was not mentioned, Matthew was not mentioned. None of them were mentioned in the Quran. Yet the Quran says this Isa bin Maryam was a Muslim. He had followers. Why is it the closest followers who walk with him, who were with him day and night, suffered with him, called the disciples of Jesus or the 12 apostles, are not mentioned in the Quran? How can we trust the Quran is the word of God? If Allah claims to have sent Jesus with guidance, revelations, and the followers, that's what it says, why does the Quran erase their identity? Why does it preserve no chain of discipleship, no eyewitness, no named transmitter of the gospel? When Jesus left to heaven, he left individuals here who continue the gospel. Allah never mentioned them. Allah never mentioned one person who in fact was with Jesus, who in fact was his disciple, his apostle, who in fact he called the apostles. He himself called the apostles. Allah never mentioned them in the Quran. How can we trust the Quran as infallible as the Quran that is a book affirming the prior books? One of them is the gospel of Jesus Christ crucified. If the Quran cannot, make me clear, name even one apostle of Jesus, was Jesus leading nameless followers? Or is the Quran account historically detached from the real Jesus of the Bible? This is a question we have to ask. We have to know this hour. If Muslims fails, which I know they can't answer because it's not in the Quran, to provide clear Quranic evidence, then the conclusion follows logically that Jesus was not a Muslim, number one. Two, Quran is not infallible in its account of Jesus as well. And Islam claims to continue with Jesus collapse in its entirety, the infinitum. Let me give you the way. Let me challenge way of thinking. Let's make it clear. Maybe we can get it ourselves clear. Why does the Quran name Muhammad's companion repeatedly, but refuses to name Jesus' apostle, even one person? And we say Jesus and Muhammad are relative, believe in the same Allah, believe in the same God, believe the same Islam, they preach the same message. But when it comes to Muhammad, all his companions, Sahaba, are mentioned in the Quran. In contrast, the disciples, the apostles of Jesus Christ, are not mentioned, even one of them mentioned in the Quran. Jesus and Isa, do you think it's a very same person? Or Isa is a fictitious creation of Muhammad? Why does Allah allegedly forget the names of the very men who spread Jesus' message? If the Injil was revelation, who transmitted it? And why are the anonymous, these transmitters in the Quran? They're anonymous, they're not known in the Quran. Why does the Quran call them Al-Hawayim, disciples, but provide no historical details about them? Not the name. But when it comes to Muhammad, Sahabas are mentioned. Let me ask some theological questions. Maybe that might help you. For thinkers, for theologians, for Quran scholars or Bible scholars. This is the questions. How can Jesus be a Muslim prophet if none of his closest followers are identified as Muslims? How can he be a Muslim, but his followers are not identified as Muslim? Meaning the Quran never say that, or there was Peter, a follower of Jesus, was a Muslim. There was John, the follower of Jesus, was a Muslim. They are not identified as Muslims. It's only Jesus was a Muslim, but his followers are not identified by name as Muslims. That's the theological question. Can a prophet of Allah fail to successfully teach Islam to his own disciples? I'm asking a question. Can he fail to teach his own disciples? Because it seems here Isa bin Maryam failed to teach his disciples. If he has disciples, his followers, why are not mentioned in the Quran by name? At least one or two or three. But when it comes to Muhammad, they are mentioned in the Quran. Now you can see the problem with the Quran. You can see that this Isa bin Maryam, who fictitiously created by Muhammad, self-proclaimed prophet, is not Jesus of the gospel. If Jesus preached pure Islam, why did his disciples immediately preach his divinity? Because Jesus was a Muslim and he was not God. But when we read about the disciples, followers of Jesus in the gospel, they are preaching Jesus was a divine, he's God. What a contrast, what a contradiction. How can a Jesus who preached Islam is a Muslim? Now he has disciples who are preaching contrast to the Islamic foundation that there's only one Allah and Jesus is not God. They're preaching Jesus is God. This is the trouble to Islam. It's a tragedy in Islam. It's a collapse of the entire Quran as fake, as not according to what it says, confirming the prior books. Something the Quran never explains. Why? I'm asking Muslim, if Jesus preached Islam, why did disciples preach that Jesus was divine? Why? Why did they say is divine while they know that they are Muslim, they can't say Jesus was divine? But in the gospel, the disciples of Jesus preached that Jesus was divine. In fact, they say straight, he is God. Why does Allah blame Christians for corruption, but never names who corrupted the message? Who corrupted the message? You say, Apostle Paul, show me the Quran. You say, oh, the message is corrupted. This Christian is corrupted. The Bible is corrupted. Okay, who corrupted the Bible? Who corrupted the gospel? Who corrupted the Zabur? Who corrupted the Torah? Why Allah fails to say these words? These were questions to Muslims. Now, let me ask you historical questions, because we have historical questions. What? A couple of them. Why does the Quran contradict first century historical sources that clearly name and identify Jesus' apostles? Why the Quran contradict? Because Quran never mentioned, never acknowledged them, never show that they were in fact disciples of Jesus by name. Why does the Christian sources preserve names, places, martyrdoms, writings, while the Quran provide silence? There's just quietness. When it's about certain details about the gospel or the Zabur or the Torah, there is silence. They just mention one person. Jesus was a Muslim. Jesus is Isa bin Maryam. Okay. When he died, how was the gospel, the Injil, proceed? These were the disciples of Jesus. Continue the gospel. Are they mentioned in the Quran by name? So how do we know that Jesus had disciples? Why is it silence? When it comes to the disciples, when it comes to Jesus, the Quran is silence. This is why Isa bin Maryam cannot be Jesus Christ. He cannot be a Muslim. My question is this: where are the names of the apostles or the disciples of Jesus Christ in the Quran? Where are the names of the apostles and the disciples of Jesus Christ or Isa bin Maryam in the Quran? Show it to me. I will convert and become a Muslim right now. This is 2026, brother. I'll be exposing Islam. Believe me. And I believe those who are open mind, with open heart, they will question Islam themselves and they will follow Jesus Christ crucified. Number 11, another question. Why does Islam rely on late interpretation instead of early eyewitness testimony? There are people who walk with Jesus. The historian walk with Jesus or exist with Jesus. Some were not Christians, they are not religious, they're just normal historians, and they preserve information, and they say, in fact, the disciples of Jesus was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But when it comes to Islam, they don't rely on the original sources. They've manufactured new sources and make the manufactured sources as true and sound and veracious. Islam, you're messed up. Quran, you're messed up. Muhammad, you're messed up. Allah, it seems you're not all-knowing. You're not omniscient. Jibril, it looks like you're Muhammad himself. There was no such a thing like a Jibril. Or maybe it's a demon. Why does Allah wait 600 years to correct Christianity but still omit basic historical facts? For 600 years after Jesus left, Allah never spoke to nobody. That means people, for 600 years, they had wrong information. They all died and went to hell. This Allah doesn't care. It's really bad God who doesn't care. For 600 years, he just let people have wrong information. Christian corrupted the Bible. Apostle Paul corrupted the Bible. Allah is quiet, waiting for Muhammad. Here comes Muhammad, and everything that happened at the time of Jesus and going backward becomes null and void, and start creating a new gospel, a new Torah, a new whatever. You have to start thinking, brothers and sisters. If truly Allah is real, he can't just let his people perish for 600 years. It's because Islam is fake and was created by Muhammad. Islam is not Abrahamic. Islam has no relationship with prior prophet. In fact, never existed before Muhammad. Before Muhammad, there is no evidence, whether historical, scientific, theological, that can exhibit to us there was a word Islam before Muhammad. Now, let me give you some consistent questions, finalizing it. If Allah is all-knowing, let's listen carefully now. If Allah is all-knowing, why does he give less historical details than secular historians? Meaning, why Allah is giving very little information, but the secular historians have more information, broader information, more intelligent than Allah. You can rely on historical findings in Rome, in Syria, in Turkey, in Egypt, in wherever. They have more better historical finding about Christianity than Allah. Another question. Why does the Quran demand belief in Jesus but disconnect him from his history? You can't say just believe in Jesus, Isa bin Maryam, he's Muslim, but you are disconnecting from history. Why? Meaning that those who are making Jesus, making the history with Jesus, the disciples, those mothers who work with him, the miracles, the work he did, you disconnect him with that. You just create another Isa bin Maryam. And so you got to believe in him. He is a friend of, he is a messenger of Allah. He spoke when he was a baby. Islam is fake. Islam is fake. Isa bin Maryam is not Jesus Christ of the Bible. This is what makes the whole Islamic book, the Quran, bogus and null and infinitum. The last question. Why does Islam affirm Jesus but deny the very people who knew him best? Because there are people who knew Jesus, walk with Jesus, preach with Jesus, learn from Jesus. When Jesus left, these 12 disciples or the apostles, they continue living here, spreading the message of Jesus. Why Quran? Why Muhammad? Why Allah or Jibril never mention their names? By the way, let me ask you a question. Who has the power to appoint apostles? Only God can appoint apostles. Only God. Only God created the Rasul. Rasuls is God choose them. Guess what? Jesus appointed the 12 Rasuls, apostles, messengers. That makes Jesus God. Muhammad has never think about it. He didn't have to say, I'm God. Guess what? Those who follow him are apostles. Those who follow him are prophet. Guess who made them apostles and a prophet? Jesus made them. I'm returning to my very first questions of our subject tonight. Where are the names of the apostles of Jesus, of the disciples of Jesus, the followers of Jesus, those 12? Where are their names in the Quran? If Isa bin Maryam is Jesus Christ, if the Quran came to affirm the prior books, then at least Allah should mention those who continued the gospel after they left. But to my surprise, the Muhammad Sahabas are there. The followers of Muhammad are there. When it comes to Jesus, the Quran was silenced because of one thing. Muhammad is Allah. Muhammad is Jibril. Muhammad is Islam. Everything about Islam is Muhammad. Without Muhammad, there's no Islam. Without Muhammad, there's no Islam. This is why Islam is fake. If Islam is not fake, if Muhammad was a true prophet and received message from Allah, and Jibril superficially spoke to Allah, and Allah is omniscient, and Quran is more detailed according to Muhammadans or Muslims, just answer my last questions. Where are the names of apostles of Isa bin Maryam? That's their name they call in the Quran. You show it to me. You give it to me. Believe me, openly in the daylight, broad 12 noon, when all the sun is up, I will be holding a Quran and doing shahadification. I will shahadification. And I say Jesus is not God. I'm done with Christianity. Just give me those information so that I can believe in Allah and I can believe that the Quran is more detailed and came to affirm. Thank you so much. Shalom. Bye.